Imagine crawling through a pitch-black crawl space, air damp with a scent of earth and decay, and hearing a whisper. A whisper that says your name, but it's not a voice you want to remember. What would you do if you found yourself in a town that felt wrong, not just because of the eerie silences that stretched too long, but because you couldn't shake off the feeling that you were being watched? This is Evansville, Colorado, a town that, in the summer of 1997, was my unintended stopover. My journey was meant to be an escape, you see, an escape from my past, from memories I'd hoped to leave buried. But fate, it has a way of dragging you back. Right when I was scraping the bottom of my savings, desperation led me to a flyer at a visitor center. A job offer, a plumber's assistant, no experience required. Competitive pay, those words usually meant less than adequate wages, but I had nothing to lose. Picking up the payphone, my fingers trembled as I dialed the number. The town's quietude was unsettling, even for me, a drifter used to silence. "Hello?" a gravelly voice answered. Tony Ridalgo, the man I would soon learn to fear. His voice had the texture of someone who'd smoked too many cigarettes, rough and unwelcoming. "Hi, I'm calling about the job," I stammered, trying to mask the anxiety creeping up my spine. Silence hung heavily between us, stretched taut like an old rubber band waiting to snap. He finally broke it with a question about my name and where I came from. Forrest Aldez, from nowhere special, I wanted to say, but chose to stick to the truth. Each pause from Tony was a loaded silence, the kind that makes you question what really lurks behind the words unspoken. When he asked if I could hold a wrench, I told him about my dad's woodshop, though the truth was, I barely did anything but watch and clean. He seemed satisfied with my meager experience, and I hoped his hesitance to say more was just his way of being thorough, not sinister. The following day, my battered Camry chugged up the mountainous road, the engine whimpering like a wounded beast. I arrived just in time to see Tony, a monolith of a man with thick glasses and a belly that stretched his shirt, finishing his cigarette. As I followed him into the cluttered warehouse, the air was filled with a musty odor. The smell of metal, sawdust, and something faintly chemical. It made my skin crawl, but I dismissed it as part of warehouse life. In his dimly lit office, I sat across from Tony, who had a picture frame stained with paint. His family, I presumed. Our conversation veered strangely towards family. "Do you have family?" he asked, his penetrating gaze making the hairs on my neck stand. His questions flitted over my past with an uncanny interest. Questions that seemed innocent but left me feeling exposed, vulnerable. "Well, Forrest, I think you'd be a great addition to the team," he finally declared, jarring me from my thoughts. His laughter clashed with the eerie quiet of the room, sending a chill that I shrugged off as nerves. He named a salary that was both dauntingly low and unexpectedly high. Everything felt paradoxical in this town. Days turned to weeks, and the jobs we tackled were simple, mundane. Tony was patient, unusually so, and didn't belittle me for my ineptitude. I couldn't help but feel a false sense of security, a calm before the storm. Each morning, as the sun spilled over the jagged peaks, I reasoned that my paranoia was nothing more than an overactive imagination. But I was wrong. One fateful day, we worked under a house, an endeavor requiring my least favorite atmosphere, enclosed spaces. As I crawled beneath the floorboards, the air turned suffocating, and the darkness pressed in like a heavy hand clamping over my mouth. My heart pounded in my chest, a visceral thrum in my ears. Spiderwebs caressed my skin like cruel silk fingers, drawing me deeper into a childhood fear, a fear I couldn't name. Then, a whisper, soft yet unmistakable. "Forrest." It wasn't Tony. It was a voice I dimly recognized from locked memories. The hairs on my arms stood in rigid salute, and I froze, cold dread pooling in my stomach. Had I imagined it? Was the solitude warping my senses? The whisper came again, insidiously curling around my name like a serpent. "Help," it pleaded, echoing in the space around me until it consumed my thoughts. Panic surged, a tidal wave threatening to drown me. I clamped my hands over my ears, desperate to silence it. The voice begged, urged. "Stop!" I shouted, the sound ricocheting through the crawl space, my voice cracking with desperation. I fled from the shadows, my vision blurring with tears. When I emerged into the daylight, Tony was there, waiting, his presence both a relief and a reminder of something I couldn't decipher. "Let's grab a beer," he suggested, his voice a quiet harbor in my storm of confusion. In the watering hole, the local bar with its rundown appearance and solemn patrons, I struggled to compose myself. Tony ordered our drinks, and we sat in the back where silence was not a comfort but a companion. "Good work today," Tony said, his voice gruff but genuine. I laughed softly, nerves fraying at the corners of my resolve. "Guess you didn't expect to hire such a pussy," I mumbled, half joking, half truthful. "Fear is evolutionary, son," Tony murmured, his eyes distant. as if seeing through the layers of time. I wondered what he saw, if he too was haunted by whispers that the daylight couldn't banish. The silence stretched again, its weight mutual between us. It was then I realized this town bore secrets, secrets that murmured in the shadows and echoed in the whispered calls of the night. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, grasping shadows, the reality set in. I wasn't just a traveler passing through. I was ensnared, an unwitting player in a narrative that wove itself before I could untangle its threads. Tony knew this. I saw it in his eyes. A knowing glance, a shared burden. What lay in the whisper, in the crawl space beneath our conscious fears? An echo of the past, or a harbinger of what was to come? If you find yourself in a town like Evansville, take heed of its whispers, for they reach into the deepest recesses of your soul, calling you to face that which you've sought to bury. If this story kept you up tonight, subscribe to the Dark Threads. New horror every day.